Can everybody see my slides? Yeah, awesome. So when you're looking at the pitch deck, and Hannah kind of mentioned this yesterday as well, everything is in the context of human psychology. So just keep in mind when you're presenting information to investors or anyone that the average human person can only hold 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information in their working memory at any time. So when you think about your overall deck structure, really you should only have 7 key takeaways that that person is expected to remember. And if you have way more than that, then the investor won't remember that stuff, but they might remember 7 things that you've said. So you want to be in control of the narrative to the point where the 7 things that the investor remembers are the 7 things you have set up for them to remember. So here is an example of a first slide of a pitch deck. Please write in the chat why you think it's not a great slide, in your opinion. Or maybe you do think it's great, I don't know. But just write down any points as to what you immediately think when you look at the slide. No information hierarchy, too crowded. Yeah. Too much going on. Yeah. So we're just going to talk about some of the reasons why it's not a great slide. And by the way, this whole deck that we put together is based on seeing hundreds of decks and people that actually submit information to us that looks very similar to this. So just remember that slide, we see slides like this and we see 25 slides of that. And then we get to the point where we've just looked at the whole deck and we pretty much have no idea what's going on. So we're going to go a few reasons why slides are bad, and then we'll go over why we think slides are good. So based on that slide that I just showed you, our business is a great SaaS, ML, AI, Web3, buzzword, 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 buzzword. Like that is not a good introduction to what your business is doing. So there's a lot of founders that might jump on a trend, say, for example, AI, and say, we're using AI. What the investor actually wants to know is the application of AI that you're using. So what is the benefit of you having AI in your product? And can you put that in a 1 sentence? So like the output of using AI, rather than just saying we're using AI, will always be better than just mentioning the buzzword to begin with, especially if you have multiple buzzwords. And then if you're not using any of this tech, but you're saying it, then that's even worse because you're losing trust. And our business is redefining how people work. So you've got 2 mixed messages already here, and you want 1 key message that you're getting across on this slide. So if you've got 2 points that you're making at the same time, even if it's 2 different one-liners, which we also see on pitch decks sometimes. First slide, 2 one-liners. Which one-liner is it? Like what is it that you want us to know? Another huge thing that we notice a lot, and this is just on the very first slide, the problem slide will say something like this: we're fixing climate crisis. And 80% of people that we asked said they really cared about the climate. Like, yeah, if you're going to ask 20 people, they're going to say that they care about the climate. But like, how many of those people are actually potential customers for your business? Like, are they people that are going to pay for a solution to solve climate change? It's trying to express like validation or metrics or traction, but in a way that an investor will be like, it's kind of an irrelevant stat because I don't see how that's going to relate to potential customers in the future. Another thing that people mention right up front is we're growing. Like, here's a chart demonstrating that we're growing, but they have nothing on the axis to understand, like, have you gone from like 2 users to 5 users to 10, or like 20K to 40K to 100K? Like, just if you are going to use graphs and charts and stuff, just make sure you put some context in into what the axis is so we know what we're actually looking at. But as a lot of people said in the chat, overall, there's just too much going on, like that the investor just doesn't know what the key message is that they're supposed to be taking away. Is it that you're using great tech? Is it that you've got like an incredibly visionary business? Is it that it's really timely because it's in the news? Is it that you're growing? Is it that people really care about the problem? Like, we just need to have 1 point. So TLDR, in your slide deck, each slide can only have 1 takeaway. Now, I know I said that you can remember 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information, and you've got 11 slides, but that's because some of the slides are going to be saying the same thing in essence. But just when you're writing down problem slide, what's the one thing that I want an investor to think when they look at this slide? Same with solution. Too much text is way too much information. So for anybody that knows Guy Kawasaki, he has a rule of thumb. Everything you want to say on a pitch deck should be in size 30 font, which is the size that that is written in. If you're starting to write things in size 20 font or size 10 font in order to be able to fit it on the slide, that's a good indication that you've got too much on the slide. So make the text as big as you can to make as big of an impact as you can, and then you'll know that you're not trying to over communicate or say too much. This is from a deck perspective, relating back to what we were talking about with Hannah. This is if you're pitching the deck, so you're actually articulating the deck in front of an investor. It's slightly different if you're going to send a deck in advance and you're not able to talk alongside the deck, because you have to put a little bit more information on for them to understand. You obviously can't have like one heading and then they're just reading like a few different sentences. So this is if you're actually talking alongside the deck. So another thing that we've seen a lot is people using continuous prose on this is my solution, or this is the problem that I'm solving. Like, just try and read that, and it's completely overwhelming, even if it's in size 30 font. This is ChatGPT's reasons why you shouldn't use continuous prose on a slide, but I bet nobody's even bothering to read it, because like as soon as you see it, your brain just goes like, can't be bothered, and then you move on to the next thing. So cut out anything that has like additional words that aren't needed, like and, you know, and or like all those in between words. Just summarize everything in bullet points as much as you can, so that investors not looking at something and just being overwhelmed with the amount of text that they're seeing. Okay, so we're going to get into the slides. It's actually 11 slides. This is the 11 slides that you should have in your pitch deck. You need to have all of them. You can potentially have more than 11. For example, a solution slide might actually be two slides. It's not that you have to necessarily condense it all into one slide, although that is preferable. But these are the 11 points that you should be covering. And we're going to talk about each slide and what needs to be on that slide. But relating to what I was just saying about the key takeaway, this is what you want investors to be thinking when they're looking at each slide. So on the cover slide, all they need to be thinking is, I really want to learn more. I'm intrigued. Like, I want to continue looking at this deck. With the problem slide, I feel the problem. Like, I can see that this is a huge problem. On the solution slide, I can see that the solution is aligned with the problem. We'll be talking a bit more about how you do that on each slide, but you want investors to just have these thoughts in their mind. And when they're leaving the pitch, they're just like, yep, they understand the problem. The solution is aligned. It's the right team to do it. They've already spoken to their potential users. They validated it as much as possible. I really want to work with these people, and I can see a huge opportunity to make money. Like, and I want to meet them again. And just keep in mind that if this is your very first pitch, the only thing you want is to get to the second meeting. The whole point of that first meeting is to get to the second meeting. So really, you're giving investors no reason to say no at this point, which also links back to the amount of information that you have in your deck. If you mention a lot of information, you're essentially just giving them more reasons to say no. So an example might be if you put your valuation on your deck and they think the valuation is too high, they might just not come back to you. Whereas if you didn't have the valuation on the deck, that's a question that they're going to have. They might have a follow-up meeting with you, and then the conversation about the valuation is a conversation. It's not something that's made them say no. Similarly with financial forecasts or that kind of thing, if you put all that information in there and they read it, they might think, oh, they're not making enough money by year 3. But all of that is open to interpretation and open to conversation. So don't put it in. Tease them with information that makes them want to take that follow-up meeting. So slide number 1, this is your kind of overview slide. This is bearing in mind a tenth pretty much of your entire pitch, and the very first thing that an investor is going to see, and bearing in mind that people take about 5 seconds to make a snap decision about you and about your business. Use the real estate of this slide. There are so many people that don't use this slide to their advantage. And one thing that we see a lot is like, this is my company, and then they put the word pitch deck, and like pitch deck is in like size 100 font. It's like, yeah, okay, we know it's a pitch deck. Like, why don't you, instead of writing pitch deck, write a one-liner about what your company does? So now as the investor, I have some indication of what I'm about to be reading. And make that one-liner really visionary. We're going to be talking about narrative for the pitch tomorrow, and we've got some examples of visionary one-liners from big unicorn companies that you would have heard of, and how they then communicate that vision into the kind of pre-seed round of how they're going to execute on it. And that's the kind of thing you need. Like, the takeaway from this slide from an investor is, I want to continue reading the deck because I'm interested in what they're doing, because they've told me what they're doing. So have a think about what that one-liner might be. Obviously mention your company name at this point, and this is a good opportunity to set the scene on your brand. So especially if you're a consumer-focused product, branding is super important because you're going to have to win over a bunch of consumers with it. So make it look nice. This is an introduction to who you are, your business, your brand, and what you're going to be doing. So problem that you're solving. The one thing that investors think the most is either they don't understand the problem or they're not really solving a problem. That will be one of the main reasons why you don't get investment, is from this problem slide. So you need to prove that you really understand the problem. And to understand the problem, you have to know who the people are that have the problem, and you need to have validated with them that they have a problem. So who is currently having this problem, and how does it impact them? Like, how painful is this problem? The more painful it is, the better it is for you, because the more they're going to pay for a solution. So you want to prove to the investor that you know that it's a problem for these people. This is how they're currently solving the problem, and this is why the current solution just doesn't work for them. If you can pull data for things like this, so you can either do a survey or interview a few potential users and like really get a feel for the problem, or you can pull some data from online about the problem, but it needs to be relating to the people that are facing the problem, and the more painful it is, the better. So anecdotes and things or testimonials work really well here, of someone that has really felt the problem. And equally, if you're the person that had the problem, if you started this whole business because you had a problem and you're now solving your own problem, this is a good time to bring in your personal story of your problem and why you had the problem and how painful that problem was to you. Then your solution. So the other thing that investors struggle with is, you've mentioned that there is this problem. Let's take, for example, loneliness. Loneliness is a huge problem. It's affecting like 80% of the population, and it's getting worse because of COVID and because of social media. And so you've like articulated this problem, and then you say, and I've got this HR software product, and it's really going to help people with loneliness. Investors will be like, that doesn't link enough. You've just talked about this problem of loneliness. Now you're introducing your HR software. Like, I don't see how your solution directly links to the problem that you've just talked about, which means if that's the case, you need to go back to the problem slide and figure out how your solution directly addresses that problem. So your solution, how does it link? And then talk about the benefits of the solution to your user. So don't say like, there's a sign-in screen and then you can do this and this is all the features. Talk about the end result. So what will users come away from your solution with? A feeling of X, or they've saved time on Y, or whatever, rather than how they're actually using it. If you do have product shots, wireframes, Figma designs, that kind of stuff, put it in here. If investors don't see any product shots, they'll just assume that you don't have a product. So that's not necessarily a problem, but if you do have a product and you're not taking the opportunity to show that you've got a product, they'll just assume that you don't have one, which means they'll assume that you're earlier stage than maybe you are. So just keep that in mind and put shots in if you do have them. The business opportunity, people might see this as the TAM, SAM, SOM slide. This is one of those slides that every investor will want to see in a deck, and then they basically disregard the information. So there's a few key things that you need to be aware of. Working out your TAM. So the maths is it's the average revenue per user multiplied by the total number of potential customers you have if the product was in every single potential market globally. So you might need to do some data searching on the total market globally, and then you're multiplying it by how much money you think you'll make per user. So that's your pricing model. So just that you'll have a think about that. If you're going to be pitching VCs, this number has to end in billion. Like if your total addressable market is 200 million, it's not big enough for VCs to be interested in, because when you drill down to the SAM and the SOM, you're obviously not going to capture 100% of the market, or it's highly unlikely that you will. So in order to get the percentage of the market that you're going to get, the whole market needs to be huge so that when you've got your 1%, that's still huge. So work out your TAM. SAM is the portion of the total market you could acquire with your business model. And then the SOM is where you're going to start. So realistically, who you're going to be acquiring immediately, and kind of why your focus is there. Try and use this express this as an actual pound sign number or dollar sign number rather than like number of people. So this is all kind of financially based. I think Sharia is going to go over this in a bit more detail and why this is really important to investors as well. So I'll leave this here for now. Competition slide. This is another one that investors like pretty much disregard because they know that every startup is going to say that they're the best. No one's going to do a competition slide and say the competition is really great and they haven't got a bunch of stuff that the competitors do. But you still have to have it in there anyway, because you have to prove that you have an awareness of the landscape that you're operating in. So you know who all of the other players are. And you use this slide as an opportunity to talk about why you're different or why you're better. So there's two ways that you often see competition slides demonstrated. One is this grid where you've got you, competitor one, competitor two, competitor three, and then you've got benefits that you have and benefits that your competitors have, and you've got a tick box for you. We're great, we do everything, and the competitors, they do this, but they don't do this thing, but they do this thing, but they don't do this thing. So you're kind of pointing out why you're better. On this, we have seen quite a few people have a competitor slide, and one of their competitors will have an X against every single feature. If they don't do anything that's the same as you, they're not your competitor. So just make sure that you have some tick boxes against your competitors as well. So that means that you truly understand who your direct competitors are. This is like an axis where you might say like high price and like high utility or whatever, and then you put yourself in one particular quadrant, and then the different competitors sit in different quadrants. We've spoken to investors about this, and it's fairly equal in terms of what they would rather see. So there's a lot of different preferences, so do whichever one you think is right for you. Your business model. This is something that a lot of people leave out on their deck. So they'll talk about this huge market opportunity, but then not how they're actually going to make money. So the question is, how will you make money? Are you going to have a subscription? Are you charging people £10 a month to use your product? Is it a freemium model? So you're going to onboard your users and not charge them anything for a particular set of features, but then you're going to unlock pricing further down the line. Why have you chosen this model? Like, have you validated that this business model is the right model? Have you spoken to your users about like whether they would be willing to pay the amount of money that you're recommending? And then have you made any money already? So have you got revenue? And then can you kind of hint at projections? So this isn't like we're going to like put in a full financial forecast of 3 years and how much money we're making every month. But like with this business model, are you predicting that you're going to be revenue generating by the end of year 2? Or you're going to make £1 million by month 12 or something? Like, can you put anything in this slide that will make investors kind of sit up and listen? It relates a bit to what Hannah was saying with her LinkedIn outreach. Like, if there's just one key metric that makes you stand out, what would it be? And then you'll go to market strategy. So again, this is something that people sometimes miss out on their slide deck. It relates a little bit with the TAM, SAM, SOM slide, but who are you starting with? And why are you starting with those people? And why will you, how are you going to reach them? So if you are starting a business in the industry that you worked in before, for example, let's say you worked in universities you worked with a lot of universities, and so students are your target market. You'll say, I'm starting with university students. I'm starting with them because I used to work across university, so I've already got relationships with all of the student councils that I need to. And I'm going to reach them by using those relationships that I have to send out a targeted email to their database. So it's like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And this is why I know that it's going to work as much as possible. For an investor, it's like, well, rather than you spending money on like SEO or pay-per-click ads, you have already thought through a direct line of communication and the lowest hanging fruit that you possibly have for your business, who they are and how you're going to get to them, and then why you're going to start there. And then traction, we're going to talk a bit about traction dipping tomorrow, which is mentioning traction across all of your slides to keep investors interested the whole way through. However, you should still have a traction slide. This essentially is just proving that you're onto something. And a lot of founders think that by traction, we mean revenue or daily active users, but you can have traction if you're pre-product or pre-launch, pre-revenue as well. And that might look like letters of intent that you've had signed, or you're having free trials, but with big enterprise businesses, or you've got pre-orders, you've got a wait list, you've got a bunch of people that have subscribed to hear more about the product when it is launched. All of it is about willingness for customers to engage with and use your products. So have a think about what that might be. Things like awards, they're great, but they're not really traction. So it's not going to move the needle as far as investors are concerned. Like, really what you want is proof that customers are going to be interested in your product rather than somebody has given you an award for something. Team slide. So on the team slide, this is one of the wordiest slides we've seen, especially if there's large teams and someone's writing down all the experience. But not only do we want to know who is in your team and what their role is, the most important thing is that this is the right team to deliver this solution to these people. So the context that you need is extrapolating from the team why it's the right team, which might be a mix of skills. So we've got a technical person and we've got a commercial person who has experience selling into the sector that we're going in. People use logos here, like if you used to work at Amazon or PwC or University of Cambridge or one of those kinds of things, it's whacking the logos in, because unfortunately investors will see this and be like, well, they're impressive because they used to work at, impressive company. And not everybody has that. But if you do, use it to your advantage. The point of putting in logos is just that it reduces the amount of text. So investors can just take it in easier. Then on the bottom right-hand side, you might notice that it says logo. This is just another point about your brand and continuing your brand the whole way through the deck. We have seen pitches where we get to the end of the pitch and we have no idea what the company is called because they literally haven't mentioned it since maybe the title slide had their company name on it. And then they've talked about this problem and the solution and the market opportunity. And we're like, what is this company even called? Like, they haven't said it and they haven't written it down. And so like, we've just forgotten it because we see hundreds of pitches. And even if it was an amazing pitch and we want to tell someone about it, we now don't even know who the company is. We can't look it up on Google. So remember that someone needs to hear something 3 times before they'll take it in. And again, use that psychology to your advantage. So mention your company name at least 3 times, put the logo on every single slide of the deck, because then subliminally, they'll just be taking it in. And just always use that opportunity for branding. Why now? Another slide that people often don't put in, but is really important. Why should investor invest in you and this opportunity right now, today, versus waiting another 6 months? Like, what is so important about right now, outside of the fact that you need the money right now, which isn't good enough? Why for them should they invest right now? Is it that the market is massively booming right now? Is it that there's been a crazy shift in mindset? Is it because there's been a technological movement and you're jumping on this train and you're going to get a bunch of early adopters? Like, it has to be a reason why they're writing that check to you today. And then how much are you fundraising? So this is the ask slide. People might have already drafted what's going to be on this ask slide. You may have seen things like this before. Pie chart, we're going to spend like 40% on salaries and 25% on marketing and go-to-market strategy and X% on tech build, whatever it is. It's great that the investor knows that you know how much money you need and what you're going to spend it on. But the thing that people often miss out on this slide is what you're going to achieve with that funding. So is it that with the money that you're asking for, you're aiming to get to 1,000 users or £10,000 of revenue, or you want to launch into a different city or a different country? Like, what does good look like? And the reason why it helps having this information up front is because if you're asking investors to reinvest at a later round and you've absolutely smashed these targets, it's going to be easier for them to invest in the future. If they don't actually know what you're going to achieve with the money, then they don't know what good looks like. So founders that have done really well with this have set really good milestones and then completely smashed them. And that's when they can go on and raise a seed round with a higher valuation because they've got the metrics that they need. Contact details also useful on this slide. So that's the 11 slides, just a few key takeaways. Just remember that every slide needs one takeaway. What's the one thing that you want an investor to think when they're reading the slide? Make sure it's clear what your company name is, and take the time to create consistent branding. If you need to over-explain or you're using too many words, investors just don't believe that you've really understood the problem and solution. And it honestly is the hardest point to get right. So if you can summarize the problem in a sentence, investors will think you understand the problem. If it takes you like 5 minutes to articulate the problem, they don't think that you've got to the crux of it yet. So really work hard on nailing down the problem and the solution in as the most succinct way as you possibly can. You might think that we've missed a few slides on here. You can have this in an appendix. So if you're pitching live, an investor asks, you can have additional slides, like, for example, the financial forecast or a product roadmap, but you don't need to include that in the original pitch that you're going through. Again, if you're sending something to investors and you're not talking about it live, less is more because you don't want to give them an opportunity to say no. For anyone that hasn't started on their slides yet and just wants a little bit of help with design, I'm just going to run over a couple of slides really quickly. So communicate in a bold font in size 100 plus, and you'll be able to make a bold visionary statement. Don't use more than 2 colors to make your point, and you use a second color to highlight what you're saying. A white font works on most brightly colored backgrounds. So if you don't think you're that creative, or you don't think you're that good at design, create a bright color, put white on it, and it just works. Express the obvious. Don't hint at things. Make things really, really, really explicit. And a couple of examples of this is, let's say you're growing month on month. You can say, we had 1K, then 2K, then 4K, then 8K, which is like fairly explicit. Then you've got an arrow pointing upwards, and then you've put 50% monthly revenue growth. You've literally said in 3 separate ways the same point. An investor will just like get it. Like, don't leave them to guess what you're saying in any situation. Similarly with this, you've got your 2 co-founders and you've got their experience. Exited founders with lived experience of the problem. If you summarize it for them, you're just telling them what to think from that slide. Don't let them read all of the experience and then like put 2 and 2 together and get like, wow, they're exited founders. Just tell them. Any key takeaways like that, just make it explicit, and then they'll know that that's the takeaway that they're supposed to be seeing. One quick thing on product screenshots. I know I said put product screenshots in if you have them, but don't make it so it's illegible. A lot of people take a screenshot and then once you're actually seeing it on a slide, you can't really see what the product does, and it's all very small or it's pixelated. So if it gets to the point where the product screenshot isn't really telling the story, then just explain it as like, you do this and then that happens in the most simplest form. And then you can mention that you've got product. For anyone that doesn't know, design software like Canva is great. It's free. There's templates already. There's visuals that you can use. There's even AI where you can type something in and it creates a visual. We're not sponsored by Canva, but we love Canva. This is what this deck was created on, and other design software is also available. And that is it from me. I just realized that we've got to 10:30, so we're going to move straight on to the next session. But if you do have any questions, we can go through them at the end. And I'm just going to stop recording, Sharia, and then I'll click record again, and then we'll do your session just because it's easier for YouTube. So give me one moment, I'll stop and then start. And then if you can then introduce yourself.
Shall I just share my screen first so I can prepare the slides before I...
Yeah, sure. I just turned it on for you. So if you want to put it out now whilst I'm just doing this.